Hi everyone, my name is Gordon Snyder. A couple weeks ago I gave an NSF grant presentation to faculty at the University of Hartford. I've had quite a bit of NSF proposal writing experience and got some great feedback, so I decided to do a recording of this session. Here's part one. Note the date, October 7th, 2025, and this presentation is current to that date, but realize things can change. Also note that any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this material are solely those of the author, me. All right, let's get started. Okay, here's a quick agenda. This is the agenda I used at the Hartford session, so these are the things we'll talk about. Okay, let's look at section 1, Introduction. All right, the NSF. Okay, the National Science Foundation, or NSF, was established in 1950 with a clear mission. Unlike agencies that focus on applied research or specific missions like health or defense, the NSF supports fundamental research across all scientific disciplines, from physics to psychology, mathematics to marine biology. You can go right down the list. Their budget is about $10 billion, that's billion with a B, annually. And NSF funds approximately 25% of all basic research in the United States academic institutions. Every dollar NSF awards goes through a competitive merit review. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Understanding the NSF's mission is going to help you frame your proposal in terms that matter to the agency. Now, before we get started, here's some links. nsf.gov is the NSF website. You can do some searches. These search features and functionality in the NSF website are really good. You can find funding by the directorate. The link is here. I'll post these in the notes on YouTube. There's an award search section that contains a searchable database of projects funded by the NSF since 1989. That's really good. And some things to keep in mind. Everybody always asks about AI these days. So this is what I use or recommend using. I also recommend you change it for your proposal. Don't do it word for word. But you can say something like generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, etc., assisted with readability, wording, and formatting. The proposal authors provided all intellectual contributions, critical analyses, and final revisions. So this is something you can say. If you're using AI, I strongly recommend putting in a statement like this. I think it's important to do that. All right, the PAPPG. The PAPPG, Proposals and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, is your Bible for NSF proposals. It's a comprehensive document. It's hundreds of pages, but you don't want to let that intimidate you. I'm going to cover the essential parts today, but you should read it on your own. The NSF updates the PAPPG regularly, so always check that you're using the current version. Right now, October 7th, 2025, that's NSF 24-1, PAPPG version. And here's the critical point with this thing. Compliance is not optional. If your proposal doesn't follow PAPPG guidelines, the NSF is going to return it without sending it to reviewers. You won't get any feedback. You won't get a second chance for the particular deadline you're shooting for. It just comes back. So while the PAPPG might seem bureaucratic, it is, okay, following it precisely is your ticket to getting reviewed. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this PAPPG. It's the NSF's universal guidebook. It applies to every single proposal across every program. Okay, this is where you're going to find standard requirements, things like formatting, page limits, budgets, eligibility and award management. It's updated annually, so always check you have the current version. Now, program solicitations are different. There's different programs within the NSF, and individual solicitations are program specific. And what they do is they add extra requirements on top of the PAPG, things like special themes, deadlines, deliverables, and strategic priorities for that particular funding opportunity. Okay, the key rule here is you have to follow both documents. When they conflict, the program solicitation takes precedence over the PAPPG. And also, it's important to note that some programs don't issue solicitations. In those cases, you just follow the PAPPG. But you always want to check if your target program has an active solicitation before starting your proposal. Again, very, very important. All right, let's talk about Section 2 now, pre-proposal, pre-submission requirements. Okay, the NSF accepts proposals through two electronic systems. Research.gov is NSF's own system, and it's what most people use. It's designed specifically for NSF proposals. It's what I use. Grants.gov is another option. That's a government-wide system used by many federal agencies. Let's say you're also applying to NIH or other agencies. You might prefer grants.gov because it's what you're familiar with. However, you want to note that if you use grants.gov, you must follow the NSF grants.gov application guide, which has some different instructions than research.gov. So you want to choose your system before you start. You can't switch partway through. Once you pick one, you're stuck with it unless you want to start all over again. And another key point, paper submissions are not accepted, period. Yeah, you must submit electronically. Years ago, it was always a rush to get to the post office, the 24-hour post office, that before midnight, before 11:59 p.m. on the submission date, so you could get it postmarked with a proper date on it. It's not the case anymore. Everything is done electronic, no more paper. All right, who can submit proposals to the NSF? Most commonly, it's U.S. colleges and universities, 2-year or 4-year institutions that are accredited and have a campus in the United States. But NSF also accepts proposals from nonprofit research organizations, museums, professional societies, and similar groups. Tribal nations can apply directly. For-profit companies, including small businesses, can submit proposals to certain programs, though there's restrictions. What's not eligible? Individual researchers without an institutional affiliation cannot submit directly to most programs, with the exception of fellowship programs. And here's something that's relatively new. Individuals who are party to what the NSF calls malign foreign talent recruitment programs are not eligible. We'll talk more about disclosure requirements later, but you always want to check the specific program solicitation, as some programs have additional eligibility criteria. So check it out. All right, registration requirements. It's important you start this early. That's where proposals die before they even start. And here's what you need. You need a UEI, Unique Entity Identifier. That's assigned by SAM.gov. It replaces something called the old DUNS number, DUNS number, in 2022. Second, your organization must register in SAM, the System for Award Management. This is the government-wide registration system. SAM registration must be active and current, and it expires annually. Here's the problem. Getting SAM registration can take 2 to 4 weeks or more. Third, everyone who uses NSF systems needs an NSF ID. That's your login. Your PIs and co-PIs need to have NSF IDs. Make sure you only have one. Duplicate IDs cause problems. I went through the duplicate ID process a few years ago. I had two IDs, one from, I don't know how I got a second one, but I got a second one from another institution, and I had to clear that up. I had to get it condensed into a single NSF ID, and I had to make sure it was the one I wanted to use. Finally, your organization must complete certifications in SAM. The bottom line, if you're at an established institution, okay, you've had some NSF, your institution has had some NSF experience, these should already be in place. But if you're at a new organization or haven't submitted to the NSF recently, you want to start this process. I recommend 4 to 6 weeks before you plan to submit. I've seen some really good proposals miss deadlines because the registration wasn't ready. So make sure you get that done early. Now, timing and deadlines. There's 3 types of deadlines that the NSF uses, and you want to make sure you understand the differences. A target date is a preferred date. You can still submit after it, but you might miss a particular review panel. A deadline date is absolute. After 5 p.m. on that date, the system will not accept your proposal, period. Okay? Submission windows are date ranges. The end date of the window functions as a deadline date. And here's some critical rules. Proposals are due by 5 p.m. in your organization's local time zone. If you're in California, you get until 5 p.m. Pacific. If you're in Boston, you get until 5 p.m. Eastern. If the deadline falls on a weekend or federal holiday, it'll automatically extend to the next business day. And it's also important to remember or understand that the NSF asks for at least 6 months to review proposals. So if you submit something and the NSF likes it, you're going to wait at least 6 months before you get your funding. If your project needs to start soon, you may have missed, sooner than 6 months, you may have missed the window for this cycle. So you want to make sure you plan ahead. All right, let's look at proposal components now. All right, this is a direct copy and paste from 43 of the current PAPPG, that's NSF 24-1. The proposal must conform to the following requirements. Okay, there's font requirements, there's font size requirements, there's no more than 6 lines of text within a vertical space of 1 inch. There's margins, they must be at least 1 inch. Paper size must be no larger than standard letter paper size, that's 8.5 by 11. If you're a Macintosh user, there's a couple other fonts you can use. And these requirements apply to all uploaded sections of a proposal, including supplementary documentation. So you want to make sure you follow this. And there's a bunch of required proposal sections, and we'll cover these. But here's what goes into a complete NSF research proposal. I've listed them in the order that they appear. The cover sheet is auto-generated, but it has basic information about your project institution. The project summary is probably, to me, one of your most important documents. Single pages anyways, it is the most important single page document. It's a 1-page overview. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but it must fit on 1 page. Table of contents is also auto-generated by the system. Your project description is where you describe your research. Maximum is 15 pages, that's strictly enforced. References cited has no page limit, but should only include bibliographic citations. The budget justification, explain your costs. There's a max of 5 pages per budget on that. The facilities section describes resources available to you. Then you've got the biographical sketches, current and pending support, and collaborators information for all senior and key personnel. These must be prepared using Science CV. I hope I pronounced that right. That's the way I say it anyway, Science CV. And that's NSF special format. We'll talk about these things. You need synergistic activities for each person. You need a data management plan for your project. And if you're supporting grad students or postdocs, you need a mentoring plan. So again, we'll go through each of these in detail. The cover sheet, let's talk about that. That's auto-generated, I mentioned that earlier, by research.gov based on the information you enter. And let's highlight the key elements. Your project title should be clear and descriptive. Pick a good title. I'm terrible at picking titles. I always ask people that I know that are really good at picking titles to help me with the title. You may want to use AI to help you with a title these days. If your proposal is for a specific program, like the career program or the rapid program, the system will add the appropriate prefix. You can list up to 5 people total as PI and co-PIs. Now remember, each of these have to have their own unique NSF ID. We talked about that early. But you can list up to 5. One must be designated as the PI, and you can have up to 4 co-PIs basically. The contact is the PI. The PI is usually listed first. It's who the NSF will communicate with. You'll enter your requested total amount and project duration. Most standard grants are between 2 and 5 years. Some programs have specific duration requirements, so check that out. The primary place of performance is usually your main campus, but if you're doing field work elsewhere, you may specify that location. And it's very important, those checkboxes I've listed at the bottom. If any of these apply to your project, you must check the box. These trigger additional requirements, and we'll discuss some of those later. Missing a required checkbox can cause your proposal to be returned without review. So make sure you get these correct. All right, project summary. This is your elevator pitch. It's limited to 1 page, and that's a hard limit. It must contain 3 distinct components. And I should have underlined the word must here. First, an overview that briefly describes what you're going to do, why it's important, and how you'll do it. Second, you need a statement addressing intellectual merit, and that's how your project will advance knowledge or in your field or across fields. And third, a statement addressing broader impacts. That's how your work will benefit society. These don't have to be labeled as separate paragraphs, but all 3 must be present. I always separately label intellectual merit and broader impact. I think it's important to have those stand out. And here's why this matters. The project summary, this 1-pager, is the first thing reviewers see. It's also used by the program officers to identify appropriate reviewers. It's really, really important. I've been on so many panels. The panelists look at this first page. If they like it, they're going to really, really dig into the rest of the proposal. If it's weak, it doesn't make any sense, yeah, they'll read your project description and the rest of the proposal, but they're not going to read it with the same amount of interest they would have in a strong project summary page. Okay. You also got to remember, if you do get funded, your project summary becomes the basis for your public award abstract. Now, you want to make sure you write this for a broad scientific audience. Someone in science or engineering, but not necessarily in your subfield. Panelists consist of different members, scientists and engineers, but maybe not a scientist or an engineer that is involved in the same field that you are, subfield that you are. And you also remember, this is not an abstract of your proposal. It's a standalone document that should give a complete picture of your project at a high level. Super, super important. Now, the project description. This is that 15-page part. This is where you make your scientific case. You have a maximum of 15 pages. Again, that limit is strictly enforced. If your proposal exceeds it, it's going to be returned without review. And what goes into these 15 pages? Everything about your work. You want to start with clear objectives. What exactly do you propose to do? Explain why it's significant. Why does this problem matter? You want to situate your work in the current state of knowledge. What's known, what's not known, and where does your work fit? Then you want to get into the methodology. How will you actually do this work? You want to be specific and detailed. You want to include a timeline with milestones. You want to explain what outcomes you expect. It's very important that you have a separate section labeled Broader Impacts, with that header appearing in its own line. You can just copy and paste that Broader Impact statement right out of the project summary page, but you must have Broader Impacts specifically labeled and included in the project description. We're going to talk a lot more about broader impacts later in part 2 of this. If you or your co-PIs have had NSF support before, you have to include results from prior NSF support. We'll talk about that too. This part can be up to 5 pages, but man, I wouldn't recommend using 5 pages for this piece. Because 5 pages, that's 1/3 of your 15-page limit. But in this project description in general, everything you want reviewers to know about the science has to fit in those 15 pages. All right, results from prior support. Let's talk about this now. Now, this is required if a PI or a co-PI has an award ending in the past 5 years or current NSF funding. You have to include the award number, the amount, the period, the project title. You have to include results under intellectual merit and broader impacts headings, publication lists, if any, evidence of research products and availability, and the relation to proposed work for a renewal. If you are going in for a renewal, you do that. If you're going in for a proposal in a whole different, maybe field, subfield, it may or may not apply. Okay, that's the end of part 1. In section 2, we're going to really dig into intellectual merit and broader impacts. And again, these are the 2 essential criteria for any proposal.